Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Sarah Halson, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. Everyone is muted right now and video's off just to help prevent background noise, so don't worry if your dog starts barking. We'll be trying to answer questions as we go, so please put any questions in the chat as well as introduce yourself. My name is Sarah Halson. I am Detroit Audubon's program coordinator. Detroit Audubon's mission is to foster the appreciation and conservation of birds and the environment we share. And we accomplish this through outreach and programming such as this one for birders of all ages and expertise levels, as well as research and bird monitoring in the Detroit area. We have our entire staff with us today. We have Noah, who is our office administrator, and he will be working on closed captioning. So if you are interested in seeing the closed captioning, there is a button at the bottom that says either closed captioning or subtitles, so feel free to turn that on. And Noah, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Noah. I'm the office administrator, and yeah, we're going to be trying this out new today with the closed captioning. So I'll look forward to everybody's feedback after. And I hope that we find it helpful for everybody. Stay tuned for 101.
And we also have with us, who is doing most of this presentation, is Ava, our research coordinator. So take it away, Ava.
Thank you. Okay. So to get started, let me get my slide to turn to the next slide. Okay, so thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So just to start, I'm going to talk about why birding is even a thing, why so many people have come into this hobby and really love this hobby. So to start, birds are much more visible to us than many other animals that we have around us. Many mammals are nocturnal, meaning they're out and about while we sleep. Other animals, such as amphibians and reptiles, are far more secretive. Some birds can be really secretive too, but many birds have learned that humans are not much of a threat, and so they're out and about while we are, especially during the day when we are out. They seem to know that they can fly away from us, so they will sometimes be in extremely close proximity, and they're easy for us to see because they come in such a wide range of colors. Many birds have evolved these males that have the bright colors to attract females, and these colors are also very attractive to humans. In addition, they also create noise, which is pretty different than a lot of other animals, especially their singing. These songs are actually for other birds to hear. Some of them are territorial calls, and some of them are for attracting mates. These songs are incredibly varied and also quite constant, especially during the spring and the summer. And they tell us a lot of important information about the birds and about bird behavior. And they tell other birds important things as well. Some of these calls can be to alert another bird about a predator. And some of these birds you can hear much more than you can see them. Some birds that are more secretive, they have a really loud, very distinct sound, and so it can be easier if you know the call rather than even knowing what the bird looks like. Just knowing that call can be really helpful to know what is around you. So some of these birds you would have no idea that they're close if you didn't know their call. Even in landscapes significantly altered by humans, birds are diverse and abundant, which is again very different from other animals. In an urban area, there's very few reptiles, amphibians, or even mammals, but there's many species of birds that can thrive in urban environments, and so they're all around us all the time. And that's something I'll touch on a little bit more later. Let's go back. So we are now going to look at some of the resources or tools that we use when we start birding, how to tell what bird you're looking at. So the first we have color, shape, size and proportions, field markings, calls and songs, and habitat and behavior. Some of these tools I like a little bit more than others. Some of these you may think are very helpful, but actually there's other ones that can be a little bit more helpful. So I'm going to go through all of them. So first, color. Color seems something that would be very helpful because it's very obvious, but we don't think about that color can actually really vary a lot, especially with different lighting. It can be hard to see the color of a bird. So I have this picture on the left here where, whoops, with this background lighting, for the blue grosbeak, it's hard to tell that this bird is even blue, especially because the bird is blue due to how the light reflects off of the feathers. It's not actually pigmented. And then I have another picture here on the left where these birds are backlit, and so you can't see the color at all, but you can see the shape. And so this kind of leads into my next slide, how shape can be a much better tool. I'll show you here. So shape is one of the best tools, and we can look at this, and all of these are clearly have no color or anything, but you can still tell what a lot of these birds are. Oops, my screen is starting to get a little bit glitchy, so just ignore that. So looking at these birds, a lot of these you can recognize. So we're going to do a poll quickly just to see kind of where you guys are. So you can start by counting the amount of birds that you recognize. So some of the birds that we have in here are some ducks, geese, a heron, a gull, a woodpecker, a wren, a dove, an owl. We have a couple different things here, and I bet that you guys can tell what a lot of them are. So go through and count how many birds you could recognize at what like basic group of these birds are from, and then we'll bring up that poll and you can mark how many. So Sarah, can you help me with that poll? Bring that up for me, please. There we go. I'll wait a little bit longer. We'll get to about 1 minute, and then we will move on. But it's already looking like everybody can at least identify a couple of birds, which is really cool. And I think all of you will realize that you are actually much better birders already than you may have realized. And then I'll go through some of these shapes and point them out to you. Okay, I think we're good. Yeah, so most people were able to, at least over half of the people were able to identify 5 to 10 shapes. So that is awesome. Let me point out a couple things here. So over here in the corner, you can see my mouse in the bottom left. We have a little duck. That's pretty obvious. You guys know what a duck looks like, know the shape of a duck. Right here is a heron. You may not be familiar with herons, but when you'll see that this shape is very distinct. The long legs and the long bill and this curved neck, very distinct. This little tiny thing right here is a hummingbird, and that also has a very distinct shape. This is a gull. You can see the gull shape with kind of the streamlined body. Right here is an owl. You can see the little ear tufts are up there. That helps you recognize it. Up here, this one's pretty obvious. It's some type of bird of prey that usually is up above, soaring. There's the bird of prey. These are some more ducks or geese, some type of waterfowl. Again, that one is pretty clear. So there's several of these that you would recognize, and all you have to do is a little bit of looking at some of these species. Actually, I'll go to this next slide, and you can start to recognize these very easily. So here again, some of the species that we just went over. The duck is pretty obvious. The hawks have the large wings that are spread out. The hummingbirds are very small with this very thin beak. A woodpecker is pretty distinct because it's usually upright, kind of parallel to the tree that it's on. The owl, again, has these little ear tufts. You can recognize a crow is pretty distinct, or a dove. So there's a lot of different birds here, and a lot of them I'm sure that you recognize, and then with just a little bit of review, you would recognize much more. And so this is a really great tool, a really great starting place with looking at birds. You don't have to know exactly what the species is, but just being able to see like what kind of family is this bird from can make a really big difference in understanding what you're seeing. So our next tool is size and proportions. This is definitely a little bit more advanced for birding when you're kind of at this stage, but there are several birds that look so incredibly similar, but they're different sizes. And size is really tricky because, especially with these kind of closely sized birds, if a bird is far away from you, it's really, really difficult to see how big that bird actually is. So using the proportions of the bird can be very helpful. So my good example here is these two woodpeckers on the right. This woodpecker is the hairy woodpecker all the way to the right, and then this guy on the left side is the downy woodpecker. And they look so incredibly similar, but you can see that the downy woodpecker is smaller. But from far away, if you only have one of these birds and not the other one, it's really hard to tell what it is. So what I would suggest looking at is looking at these beaks. We can see that the hairy woodpecker's beak in relation to the length of its head is much longer, whereas the downy woodpecker's beak in relation to the rest of its head is shorter. So that's a more complex tool that you would be able to use. These hawks over here are the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned hawk, and they're also very tricky because their sizes can actually overlap. A female sharp-shinned can be as big as a male Cooper's hawk. The Cooper's hawks are generally bigger. But they can overlap. So it makes them really, really tricky. But there's these distinct little rules and different proportions that you can look at to be able to make these distinctions between some of these really tricky species. Next, we have field markings. I really like field markings. I think they're really great. It's fun to learn these markings on your own when you have time, and then go out in the field and really use these field markings to identify real birds out there. Or what can be really fun is if you go out birding and you see a bird that you do not recognize, you want to look at it and see what markings you can distinguish. Make a note of that. I would suggest actually writing it down so that you don't forget. And then you go back to the bird book, go back to the internet and look up these markings and try to find what your bird is. Or another common thing to do is to repeat those field markings to a birder friend, and it's likely that they'll be able to tell you what it is. So I should probably explain what exactly field markings are. So these are some of the distinct markings that are more obvious, that are very unique to a species, that helps us tell what a species is. So over here on the left, I have my first example. This bird has a white head. It is one of, I think it's the only large bird in North America with a large white head like this. And we know that means it's a bald eagle. So when you look at this, you see right away, oh yeah, that's a bald eagle, I know that one. But what tells you it's a bald eagle is this, along with other things, but the very obvious one is the all white head. So that's a very easy example. A little bit more complex is if you see a bird like this, you can kind of easily distinguish. There's a little cap right here, this little darker gray cap, and then you see there's a little bit of this like rufous brown color on the underside of the tail. And so those field markings, if you told those to me, I would know, oh yes, those are the field markings of a gray cap bird. So you can kind of go through and learn these markings, and that will help you be able to distinguish in the field. And then the field markings get really crazy. Like if you start looking at warblers and sparrows, they get super complicated. I don't know most of these, but this is a fun infographic that shows you the basic placement and color of a lot of these face markings on sparrows, and that can help you tell what you're looking at. So the one little example that I have here is the American tree sparrow, and we can see, okay, he has this little red cap. He has this brown line in the back of his eye. And then he also has a beak that's kind of distinct because the top part is blackish gray and then the bottom is yellow. And so I can look here at this giant diagram and I can see, oh, there's the American tree sparrow over here in the corner. I can see that red cap. I can see the line going through the eye. And I can also see this two-colored black and yellow beak. In addition, this little spot on the tree sparrow is really helpful. You can't see that in the infographic, but noticing this spot would be very helpful. There's only a couple sparrows that have a little spot there, and so that would be another marking that would help me distinguish, yes, that is an American tree sparrow.
Ava, we had a question if you could share where they could find the field marking guide for the sparrows, I'm assuming, online for future reference. Do we have it that we can share after the webinar?
Yeah, I can try to, if they would like to email, I can try to find this. I think I just searched like sparrow field markings, and this came up in images. But I could definitely help uncover it and send it out to whoever is interested. In addition, the Cardinal Lab of Ornithology has a really great website with all of the birds, like their descriptions and several pictures, and all of the field markings are in there. Any detailed bird book or bird ID app or website should mention these field markings that are best for identifying birds. And I would definitely recommend taking time to look at those because they're helpful and will make your time birding more enjoyable.
Great, thank you.
Okay, next slide. Our calls and songs. This is another thing that will make your birding so much more enjoyable if you take the time to learn some of these. I am doing some bird surveys in Detroit right now, and they're just 5-minute short surveys. And most of the birds that I am identifying and recording are from their calls because these birds call much more than they might fly across and make themselves visible. So learning these calls will really help you understand much more of what is around you. So birds have their calls and they have their songs. And the songs are generally what they sing to attract a mate or to show that a territory is theirs. And so the songs are much more common in spring and summer when the birds are mating and breeding. And the songs are really nice because they can be longer and quite complex. And you can, like I have this picture over to the side, to the right side, you can kind of match words up with them. And that helps you remember them. That's a good way to start learning. And so, yeah, it sounds like these birds, there's a giant variety of songs and noises that they make and patterns that they make. Calls, they will make all year round. So calls are nice in that matter. You can hear plenty of calls in the fall and winter. But the problem with calls is that they can be a lot more similar. They're generally pretty short. So it can be harder to learn calls because they can be so similar. But learning both of them is a great way to know what birds to be looking for, and again, to know what is out there with you. Okay. And one more, this is a really good one. This one is great for now that I have a lot of people that are always asking me about what bird they see. The first thing I ask is, where was it and what was it doing? And that usually tells me what they saw, because so much of bird behavior is repeated in what these birds do. So a lot of times people will ask about when they see a large hawk on the side of the highway or up kind of on a billboard in the highway. That's usually a red-tailed hawk. They like to sit up there. And so if somebody asks me about that, I'm pretty sure it's a red-tailed hawk. This little guy, the little nuthatch kind of at the top, is one of the only birds that will travel down a tree. So they hang on to the side of the tree and work their way down. If somebody describes that behavior, I don't need to know anything about what the bird looks like. I can be about like 90% sure that that was a nuthatch. And then here at the bottom, we have our little house sparrow friends. And these guys are the birds that very commonly will hang around like the outside of a coffee shop or something, eating crumbs. There's no other sparrow that gets so close to humans and lives in these urban areas as much as house sparrows. And so I know that if I see a sparrow in the middle of the city, it's most likely a house sparrow. And this is another thing that comes with, you can either kind of learn more about habitat and behavior through books, but I think that this is also something that comes with more time spent birding. You slowly learn these, and you know what to expect, but it's important to still pay close attention because you don't know. There could be an anomaly somewhere. There might be like a song sparrow mixed in with the house sparrows, and so it's still good to pay close attention and notice if something is a little bit different. Okay, now we have binoculars. Binoculars are great and super useful, but I don't think that they are completely necessary. I don't actually use my binoculars all that much because I kind of like to just watch bird behavior from not that far away. I'll usually just sit down and like watch the birds at feeders or something. But for bird ID, or especially if you're out somewhere and you want to be able to get a good look at a bird and you're not sure what it is, binoculars are of course very, very helpful. But I don't think that they are 100% necessary. So the main thing to know when using binoculars, and I have my pair of binoculars here. Luckily my video is now kind of working. You want to see the bird and focus on the bird and look forward, and then bring your binoculars up to your face rather than looking at the bird and then looking down to meet your binoculars, because then you're going to look back up and you're going to have no idea where the bird is, and you're going to have to take some time to try and figure out where you even need to be looking, and by that time then the bird's going to fly away. And that can happen a lot of times, even if you do bring the binoculars up to your face and try to keep your eyes on the bird, you'll still have to find it again. So using binoculars and knowing where to look definitely takes some practice, and that's still something that I'm working on. It can be really hard to, once you bring the binoculars up to your face and you're so zoomed in, to even figure out where you need to look. So if you do have binoculars, it's definitely good to practice with them. In addition, there's also these little parts that you roll out and in. And these, if you don't have glasses, you keep them rolled out. But if you are wearing glasses, like reading glasses or sunglasses or anything, then you will actually roll them down. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it makes it more comfortable and easy to see. Another thing that I've kind of slowly learned over time is thinking about how to better describe bird placement. And this is really helpful if you are ever birding with other people. If you prefer to go birding alone, then you don't really need to worry about this. But if you're birding with friends, you're going to want to know how to point out where a bird is. If there's a bird that you see and you want your friend to be able to see it, if you're just pointing at the bird, it's going to be very difficult for them to see it, especially if it's in like a dense tree or something. So what's much more helpful is to think about how you can describe this placement. So I believe the bird that I have here, this placement that I have written out is for the cardinal over here. So if I'm looking forward, I say, okay, all the way to the left, and then there's a tree behind the small pine tree. And so my friend or whoever I'm with knows to like, okay, there's the small pine tree right here, small pine tree. And then at the tree above that, or tree behind the small pine tree, at the fork to the left. So there's a fork right here at the top, or a fork right here, and then fork to the left. So the bird is right there. So it's definitely really tricky. It can be hard, and it's definitely hard when you see a bird and you're scrambling to try to figure out how to describe it. Sometimes your brain just goes blank and you're not able to think of anything. But I think it's something that is worthwhile practicing, especially because you would want to be able, if your friend sees something cool and you want to be able to see it, you would want them to be able to describe to you where it is quickly enough that you are able to get eyes on it. And then again, if more people are able to see the bird, that makes your chances of being able to identify the bird much better as well. This is a point that I mentioned a little bit already, is to continue to practice and identify the birds, even the birds that you see all of the time. So like with the little house sparrows, you never know when a different sparrow, a song or a chipping sparrow, or any of those other guys that are a little bit less common might show up in your group of house sparrows. And so you still always want to be looking closely and still practicing those calls that you hear all the time, at least reminding yourself and listening and knowing what is, oh yes, that's a robin or the northern cardinal or something like that. And then when you hear something new or you see something new, you'll very quickly recognize, wait, this is something different. I need to pay attention to this and listen closely or look closely so that I can see what this is. And so I found that that is something that's very helpful to me. Even if there's a group of sparrows, I try to get a little bit of a look at each one and be like, okay, yep, house sparrow, house sparrow, house sparrow. And then if there's a bird that seems a little bit different, I know that it could be a different fancy sparrow, as I like to call them. And then this is one of my last points about asking questions. Asking questions is how we learn. You shouldn't worry about looking dumb because everyone is learning and we can all forget what a bird call is. I seem to always forget about the robin and the cardinal call. They just have so many different noises that they make. I always get confused with them. So it's always good to keep asking questions. And it's also good to keep in mind that some bird people are not people. But most bird people still love talking about birds. And so any question that you ask is going to be appreciated and people will want to talk about it. And the only way that you're going to learn is to keep asking questions. And so especially if you're on a walk with Detroit Audubon or anybody, hopefully at some point in the future, you know that you can ask whatever question you are thinking and don't have to feel worried about if that might be a silly question. So now that we've gone through those basics, Sarah, could you pull up the birding poll for me about people's kind of level of birding? Yay. Okay, so if you guys want to go through and just kind of mark where you are with your level of birding, if you are more new to birding, this is one of your first times learning about it, or if you are a little bit more experienced, a little bit more practiced. Okay, I think most people have voted. So we can end that polling. Nice. We have a really good range of people here today. I'm really happy that some people are here who are brand new to birding or very new. That's really nice, and we definitely want to encourage those people to come into our space more and embrace birding. And I'm also happy that some of our more experienced birders are here as well, just to kind of brush up on any birding tips. And I hope that you all continue birding, and I hope that we're able to help everybody improve their birding ability just a little bit. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so now talking about bringing birds to your yard. This is a big thing right now since a lot of us are at home. A lot of people, especially lately, have been interested in setting up bird feeders. So some of my notes about bird feeders, there are feeders that seem to attract more invasive species that you might not be as interested in attracting. So some of those invasive species are the house sparrows and the European starling. Those are birds that have come over from Europe, and they're lovely creatures, but they're pretty aggressive and very opportunistic, and that has led their populations to really expand in North America, and their populations increasing so much has actually harmed some of our native birds, and so many people are not as happy about supporting those birds. So some of the seeds that you would want to focus on to supporting native birds are sunflower seeds and thistle. So I recently realized or learned that thistle is actually not thistle seed at all. It's just people keep calling it that, but it's Niger seed is the real name for it. And then sunflower seeds are a little bit bigger, and so they're not as liked by the house sparrows, but cardinals, blue jays, chickadees, all of those little guys really like the sunflower seeds and like the thistle as well. The thistle is so small that squirrels, house sparrows, European starlings, rats, if you're worried about rats, all of those are not super interested in the thistle, but a lot of the little birds, especially little goldfinches and chickadees, really like them. You can also offer larger seeds and nuts if you want to attract some of the larger birds, like maybe blue jays or cardinals, maybe grosbeak, some of those species. A great and cheap thing that you can supply is water, especially right now. It's been so hot and dry lately. It has not rained in a while. The birds really need the water. My neighbors have been having some of their sprinklers going to water their grass, and I've seen a lot of birds. There was a puddle forming, and I had cardinals and some goldfinches and a flicker. All of these birds were in Detroit, and there were so many birds that came just for the water from this sprinkler. It was so fun to watch, and all of the birds were bathing and fluffing around, and it was really wonderful for me. And water is great because you can just get it out of your faucet. You can put it in a dish or anything like that. And the birds will really appreciate it, especially right now. And watching the birds like fluff around in the bath is one of my favorite things. I think it's very, very cute. And then also in the winter, a lot of the water is frozen. And so actually if you provide water in the winter as well, the birds really appreciate that. You can look into, you could get a heated bird bath is a thing, or you can also kind of just put out some water regularly, and when it freezes, just replace it. And then lastly, native plants. This is something I really, really want to encourage. We do have many birds that eat seed, but especially in the spring and summer, we have birds that do not eat any seed at all. And these birds need insects. And those insects are supported by native plants. Even some of these seed-eating birds, like the chickadees and the cardinals, they feed their babies all insects. They need that insect protein for their babies to be able to live. And those babies have really fast metabolisms, and so they need a lot of bugs. And so, like I said, we need native plants to support those bugs. We have some resources on native plants if you want to look into them. I would love to help talk through that with you. We have a webinar it's on our website that we did about native plants. So if you're interested, that's a fun place to start. And native plants are also very nice because the native plants do not attract the house sparrows or the European starlings. You don't have to worry about squirrels or rats. The native plants really just support these native birds that are really struggling, including some of the little warblers and like this hummingbird here.
Ava, we did have a question about your thoughts on suet.
Oh yeah, suet is great. I heard that if you use suet that has little seeds in it, that those little seeds will attract the sparrows and starlings. But if you use suet that is just pure suet, a lot of those birds will not be interested, but the woodpeckers will still really like it. There's also suet where you can kind of put the access to the suet upside down, and the sparrows and starlings are not really able to eat or peck at the suet from that angle, and so they don't like that as much, but you would still support the woodpeckers and nuthatches and the chickadees that all hang upside down very, very easily. And then I did also see somewhere that the like suet kind of like bark butter can be problematic because you don't want the birds to be able to get the suet on their feathers. So having that cage for the birds to kind of hang on to and just put a little bit of distance between their belly and the suet is important, because that suet can make their feathers damaged and not waterproof and not properly functioning as a fluffy jacket in the winter especially. So yeah, just making sure that we have a pole. The cage on the suet is important. So now we have this poll, and we are wondering who currently has a space, whether it's around their house or in their neighborhood, that they believe is bird friendly, and in what ways is it bird friendly? Oh, wow. Okay. Almost everybody has voted already. We'll wait a couple more seconds. Okay. I think we're good. Okay, great. Yeah, a lot of people already have stuff set out lately, and I'm glad that people are interested in learning more. Habitat loss is the #1 reason for bird population declines, and so it is up to us to create bird habitat in our backyard, or in whatever space is available to us. That is the only way that there will be enough room for these birds to survive and for them to have enough food to feed their babies and maintain stable populations. So before we move on, we have to talk about the top threats to birds, which is not fun, but I think it's really important for us to talk about, especially if you are interested in trying to create a space that supports birds. Cats are a huge problem for birds, and most birders love and have cats. I have several cats, but they're all indoor cats. Feral cats and outdoor cats are the #1 directly human-related cause for bird population decline, especially in our area. there's a time when when young birds come out of the nest and they cannot fly yet. And so they're just kind of hopping on the ground and their parents are feeding them and they're building up those flight muscles. And during that time, they're especially vulnerable. And having the outdoor or feral cats, having those predators and having such an abundance of those predators really has a large impact on bird populations. So if you are getting a new cat at any point coming up, I would definitely recommend trying to make that cat an indoor cat. It'll live much longer, and it's much better for the birds around your house. Another thing to think about is problematic windows. Windows are the next top directly human-caused reason for bird population decline after outdoor cats. And the really unfortunate thing is that having feeders near your windows will actually lead to a lot more birds hitting those windows. So if you have a problematic window, especially if you have a feeder somewhat near that window, it's really important that you do the responsible thing and use one of the methods for making that window visible to birds. So there are tiny dots that you can put on the window. You can do like chalk marker painted windows. There's a kaleidoscape that's kind of like a netting that it has all these little holes in it so you can still see outside and all of the sunlight can still come into your house. And then one of the best methods, to me, one of the nicest looking ones is the Acopian bird savers, and they're like just like lines that hang down. They're called Zen curtains. I think they look really nice and they do the job. And so if you have a problematic window and you would like to do something about it, please email us and we can help steer you in the right direction and figure out what would be good. Lastly, if you're going to have a yard for birds, you should not be using pesticides, or at least you should try to decrease your use of pesticides because those pesticides kill the bugs that birds need. And then if the birds are eating bugs that have eaten pesticides, those are going to accumulate in the bird and eventually kill the bird from the harmful chemicals that are in those pesticides. So these are all important things to think about. They're very unfortunate and depressing, but it's important that we recognize these things in order to create bird habitat around ourselves. Next slide. There we go. I will pass it over to Sarah to talk about some resources where you guys can learn more about birds and birding.
Okay, thank you, Ava. So I'm a new birder, and I've definitely noticed the more that I recognize birds and ID them, like Ava was saying, the more I'm learning. And another way is to just look at some great websites out there that have articles. You can explore different birds and learn about different birds, both in the local area and further out. There's great articles, there's quizzes, there's lessons or classes that you can take. And one of my favorite articles is a weekly that comes on the National Audubon website. It's the Birdist Rule, and it's started about 4 years ago. So you can see two of them, the Birdist Rule number 87 and number 65. So every week is a new article, and they're fun. They cover everything really for beginning birders, from birding etiquette to birding gear, and also the best places to go birding and how to find birds, and then how to tell your friends about it. So I would definitely recommend those. The other websites, the Cornell All About Birds website is a great place. That's usually where I go to find good descriptions of specific birds. They also have a lot of good classes and lessons. There is a fee, but I think there's 1 or 2 that are free that you can check. But their app, the Cornell app, is called the Merlin Bird App, and that is free, and it's one of our favorites to use for bird identification. So I think that is our next slide.
Okay.
Ava.
There we go.
There we go, thanks. Oh, so this is the app, and there are a couple ways. First of all, the app is free, like I said, and once you download the app, then you download a bird pack. So for here, you would download the Midwest bird, and there are packs for every region in the world. So you can, if you're going somewhere specific, you can download that pack before you go. But it does take up a lot of room on your phone, so you wouldn't want to have them all there all the time. But there are a couple ways to use the app. You can either explore birds, like circled on here, and when you click explore birds, then it's going to refine your bird list to your specific location on a specific date, and you can sort by the most likely. So it's kind of a good way to look at what you might see, what birds you might see if you're going to go to Belle Isle for the day. You can look this up first and see what you might see. And then the other way to use this app is to do a start bird ID. So I use it when I see a bird and I'm trying to ID it. And once I've kind of gone through some of the tools that Ava mentioned earlier, so starting with the size, you start the bird ID, and it first asks you the size in relation to a sparrow or a robin or a crow or a goose. So that's a good way to compare what you see, kind of get that in your head to compare birds to some of those more common species. So you click on which one it's closest to, and then you're going to click on, you have the option of up to 3 colors that are the main colors of the bird. And then the last one it will ask you about is more about habitat or behavior, which, like Ava said, is a really great way to ID birds. So you have eating at a feeder, or swimming or walking or on the ground or up in trees. And from this, you get a much smaller list of what bird you could be seeing. And most times I'm able to ID the bird using this app. So definitely highly recommend getting this one. Of course, not everyone wants to take their phone with them or doesn't want to pull your phone out all the time while you're out, or just really likes to use books. I usually bring a field guide with me as well, just if in case my phone dies, or if I'm with other people and I want to show them, it's easier in a book. So these are a couple books that we recommend. Like at the top, there's some specific bird books for Detroit and for Michigan. I don't have the Birds of Detroit one with me, but I do have the Birds of Michigan field guide right here. These are organized by color. So color is still a great way to ID birds, and in here it's pretty easy to find them. The colors are up in the top left. I'm not sure if you can see that very well, but you can see that each bird has a really nice big picture and then some of the information about them. There's also a great guide that came out, the Birds of Michigan Kids Guide, which I like even better. I love looking at kids' books because they really make them more fun looking and spell things out a little simpler and quicker too. So, so this is a great guide for anyone. Then I also have the Peterson Field Guide to Eastern Birds, and this is really great as you become more advanced. It really there's a lot of birds listed on each page that are kind of similar, and then Peterson uses an arrow to point out some of the specific the field marks that are going to make that bird stand out from the other ones that are similar. So this can be really handy to have, and kind of fits in your pocket too. So those are some of the bird books that we recommend. And next, one thing that a lot of birders like to do is keep track of the birds that you've seen for your whole life or for the specific year or season. And one way you can do that is on eBird, which is an online bird list. And another great thing about eBird is that it is a way to contribute to science. So you can become a citizen scientist and add your list of birds onto eBird. And then scientists are able to really study the migration patterns of birds, which is really important. There's actually a lot less known about bird migration than I thought. So it's really helpful to have those citizen scientist bird lists available to scientists as they're studying. wondering where the birds are going. So there's an online version that you can go in and submit lists. And then this is the eBird mobile app, which I really like. It's very easy. When you open it up, you just click on Start Checklist, and it starts the time, it has the date, it has the location. It sort of gives you, if you're walking, it sort of gives you how much you've walked as well, if you've walked a mile or two. So once you have your location, then it brings up all the birds that might be in that area. So when you see one, you can type them in and click how many you've seen and enter that in. And then once you've seen it, like if you saw a Canada goose, then when you see another, or probably 20 more, then you can click back in there and add the actual number that you've seen. And then once you have recorded all of the birds that you've seen, see the next slide? When you are done, you can click stop. And one thing about eBird is they really want you to enter all the birds that you see. So you don't necessarily skip the robins and the Canada goose and the starlings that you see. They want complete lists. So it just asks you if it is a complete list. So I highly recommend everyone use the eBird. It's a great way to keep track for yourself as well as contribute to the scientists.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah. Next, I'm just going to go through some of the really common birds that we have around. Some of the birds where if you just kind of took a quick walk are birds that you would likely see. It is 12:50 already, so I'm going to try to go a little bit quick through these, and then we'll have time for questions. So if you guys have any other questions, any other just like broad bird questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll go over those. But for right now, I'll just start off with some of these common birds. I also want to make a point that the suburbs are a great place for birds. There's been studies that show that bird populations can actually be very high in the suburbs. And even within cities, we have plenty of birds as well. This peregrine falcon here is, I believe, we have one nesting pair in Detroit in the mid area, and at a lot of the smaller parks around Detroit. There's plenty of birds, especially during migration. There's interesting warblers and flycatchers that come through. So no matter where you are, there's birds that you can find. So some of these common birds. The first bird is the house sparrow. Like I've mentioned before, this bird is an invasive species. And it was brought over from Europe, actually, as a form of pest control for grain crops, but that didn't go well, and the birds just started eating the grain crops. So it was a pretty big failure. And these little guys are really opportunistic, and so they've really adapted well to living around people. If you actually go out into a semi-forested area, you probably won't see very many of these, but around your house or around shops, there's usually tons of them, and they're really good at finding like little crevices, or little places, possibly like around your garage or around your house, to build their nest. They're very common, especially around people, and they are usually seen in small groups. They're pretty social birds. And this over in this bottom picture to the left, on the left side is the male. So the male has kind of some more chestnut brown on the back, and then some black markings. And the female she really doesn't have many distinct markings, but this little kind of beige eye stripe is a helpful marking to use. And the next bird we have is the European starling. This is another invasive species that has taken very well to living around people. This bird is very smart. They can also make a lot of different noises, so sometimes they can be tricky when you're going out birding. You think that you're hearing something new, but it's just a starling making a bunch of weird sounds. There's starlings that sometimes if they are raised by people, they actually can learn to say words similar to like a mockingbird or a parrot. And they're very opportunistic as well. So these are another common species that will find whatever crevice in your house or around your garage or in your gutter or something like that and build a nest there. And they're really beautiful birds with these kind of metallic colors on their feathers. This is a young starling. The starlings are so common, especially around people, that it's pretty common to see the juveniles. And they are these gray birds, so that you can see this one here has some of those like black and white feathers coming in, but the gray coloring with the dark beak is what the young ones look like. And then the starlings are also common birds that form these super large flocks called murmurations. Those can be other birds as well, but it's very common with starlings. The next bird is the mourning dove. These guys are wonderful. I've read a couple different places that these are the most common bird in the US or in North America. They can be found almost anywhere. And they're really beautiful with this kind of like velvety tan and some of this like pink metallic shimmer on their neck. When they fly, their wings, the wings rushing through the air, actually create kind of like this whistling noise that sounds like it's a call, but it's actually just their wings. That's very cool. And they make this sad call that Sarah will show you in a second. They make this sad call, and that's why it's called the mourning dove, not because it's out in the morning, but because they're in mourning, they're sad, and they have this sad call that they make. They're also pretty common to nest around people, and they have very cute little babies that commonly are out of the nest a little bit early because they're not very talented nest makers. The nests are usually a little floppy. So Sarah, are you ready to play that call?
I was playing it. I guess it's not working.
No, Stan.
I don't know.
Okay, we'll just
Sorry.
move on then. Yeah, so but you can go on the Cornell Lab, the website that we've mentioned that's good for ID and markings. They also have a wide variety of the different calls that birds make, and so you can click on a bird and you can click through the different calls. And I like doing that just in my free time because I think it's interesting, and learning calls is really great, just to hear those calls when you're out walking the dog or anything. So the next bird that we have is this little guy, the chickadee. They're very small. These little guys, they're small, but they're also very intelligent. You can see they're almost half of their body is their head, which I think is so cute. They're good. They have good memory. They do like seed caching, and so they'll hide seeds in places and then come back to those seeds in the winter. They do a chickadee-dee-dee call, and that call is actually like a warning call, and the number of dee-dees that they make is kind of the amount of danger associated with whatever animal they're warning about. So I used to let my dog outside, and I would always hear them make a bunch of dee-dee calls, like there was a big dangerous animal out there. And then their song, oh, I think I can hear it now, Sarah. And their song is like a much quieter, like boop boop. And Sarah thinks that it sounds like cheeseburger, but I don't hear it as much. And so this one, they are a little bit interesting that their call is actually longer than their song. Normally it is not, but for them, that is the case. And they are little acrobats, always flying around and hanging upside down. There's the deet doot. The next bird that we have is our robin, the beautiful robin. I still love robins, even though they're so common. The male has a more dark and distinct head and breast. The females are a little bit less distinct, a little bit less showy or conspicuous. They're big singers. They have a pretty long song that they're always singing. And you can see them a lot of times hopping around on the lawn eating worms. That's kind of why they've gotten so popular, is that they've adapted to using the lawns to find worms. And then this little guy in the corner, that with the speckled chest, is a juvenile robin. They have those little speckles on them, and sometimes people see that and they don't recognize, and they're like, what bird is that? And that's a juvenile robin. They're pretty common and they're so adorable. They're very fun, and their chest is cute. The next bird is the northern cardinal. This is a bird that I'm sure you guys know. The male is all red and the female is more of this olive color with some of the red on her. This little guy in the left corner here, this is what a juvenile cardinal looks like. They're so funny looking to me. And so you can actually tell if you're looking, the female and the juvenile is pretty similar, but the female has the bright red beak. So at a certain age, their beak turns that bright red. But if you see a bird, a cardinal, who has still kind of this brownish color beak, that means that that is a young cardinal. So that's fun to see. Next bird is another very common bird that I'm sure you guys recognize, which is the blue jay. I mean, it's an incredibly beautiful bird, kind of like a purplish blue almost. And again, these guys are covids, so they're related to crows, and they're very, very smart. They will definitely, they'll mimic sounds that they hear. And they are even known to mimic the sounds of hawks around a bird feeder, scaring all the birds away, and then they go to the bird feeder by themselves and get all of the seeds to themselves. They are very sneaky and very smart. They're just wonderful birds. Our next bird, this is our last bird. I just picked a woodpecker because we all love woodpeckers. This is the red-bellied woodpecker. And this one is funny because we always want to call it the red-headed woodpecker, but it's actually a different woodpecker. It's called the red-headed woodpecker. This guy is called the red-bellied. There's like a tiny bit of pink on the belly that you can barely see. So that is kind of confusing, but it is the red-bellied. And the males and females are different. This guy right here on this side, on the left side of the tree, is the male with the more red above his head, and then the female has more gray on her head. And they have this beautiful zebra striping, black and white, on their back and on their wings. And those are some of the most common birds. If you have any questions about any other birds that you see, I love getting bird pictures and telling you what they are. A picture is usually the best way. It can be hard to describe birds, especially if you're new. And then do we have any questions that we want to go over, Sarah?
We do. One from Stephanie. She says, I live downtown in a high rise. What's the best way for me to be a bird advocate, help the local bird population, since having a feeder or bath isn't an option?
Oh, I would definitely say that native plants would be your best option. If you have any like a porch area or a balcony area, or if you guys have a like a garden in front of the apartment building, or you can be a part of a community garden and plant native plants there. Native plants are a really great way to support birds without technically being like feeding birds. And so those restrictions are good to get around. And then I would also suggest, since you're in that building, to think about what windows are in that building and what you guys could do to minimize the impact of the windows. Setting up the like the dots or the hangy things, that can be a lot, and it's hard to convince people to do those because we love our like open, clean windows. But what you can do is you can turn the lights off at night, especially during spring and fall when the birds are migrating. Those bright lights are really disorienting to the birds and can mess up their migration. It can lead them to crash into the window, or can lead them to just repeatedly circle the building, running out of energy. So yeah, native plants, and maybe starting a campaign to ask people to turn off all of their lights at night. Those would be great. Next question.
All right, the next question I have is from Lynn. I have birds eating literally the brick on my front porch. They have the entire top layer of one brick gone. Which bird might be doing this, and how can I stop them?
I have no idea which bird that would be. But I do know, actually that's fun to bring up because that's a really cool thing about birds. So birds do not chew like we do. Instead they have, I forget if it's the crop or the gizzard, where they eat the food, and then the food is actually ground up by little tiny pebbles that the birds eat. And that's how they digest. And so it's very common to see birds like picking at little pebbles and stuff. Especially like you'll see that with chickens, like chickens just peck at the ground and they peck at pebbles. And if you have like a budgie, you know you're supposed to offer it like a little thing of gravel for them. So I have no idea what you would do about that, but I wonder if you did put a little pile of gravel, you could look into some of the gravel that people buy for budgies. If you put a little bit of that, if the birds would peck at the gravel instead of the little pieces of brick. But that's the best thing that I can think of. That is an odd problem, and sometimes that happens with birds. I'm sorry that they are doing that and eating your brick.
All right, our last question is to tell a little bit more about Detroit Audubon. So I can start, and then Ava can say a little more about what she does. So maybe I did say at the beginning, but after the appreciation and conservation of birds and the environment we share, we've been around since 1999. We're one of the original chapters of National Audubon. So I'm the program coordinator, so I coordinate programs like this and outreach. Usually we just start ours. So usually we would do outreach more through field trips or presentations, but we are excited to offer this as an opportunity to connect with a lot of you. We do most of this work through membership, so we want to thank all of you who are members, and I know we have a few of you that joined to participate in this webinar, so thank you. Our office is downtown in Cass Commons, and we also do work with schools as well. So we have programming schools, and looking forward to starting that up again next year. And then Ava is our research coordinator, so you can just say a little bit more about what you do, maybe.
So I work on some of the main programs that I focus on. We have our Detroit Bird City project, which is where we're working with the Parks and Rec Department of Detroit City to turn some of their more underutilized parks that they don't have a ton of funding for taking care of those parks or for making, like, using play equipment and stuff like that. We're turning those into really nice green spaces that support birds with native plants, but also provide like a beautiful space with a walking path and a bench and educational signs to encourage people to interact with the space and interact with nature. We also have our black tern monitoring project, and that is researching the black terns that live out at flats. They're a species of bird that seems to be facing some pretty drastic population decline. And so we're working on monitoring them, studying them, and seeing how we can support the population so that we can get them back to a stable state. And then the last project is our Safe Passage project, where we are trying to implement and encourage bird-friendly windows and implement and encourage turning off lights at night, especially during migration season. So those are my main focuses. If you have any interest in any of those, just let me know. I would love to get you involved in supporting bird conservation in our area.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. We will be sending out a recording, but like Ava said, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach all of us at staff@detroitaudubon.org, or go to our website to reach us individually and see some of the projects that we talked about, as well as our upcoming webinar. Our next couple are, we have one about black terns, about the research Ava was talking about, and then one with from Wildlife Federation, their native plant programming that they offer for houses of worship, called Sacred Ground. So we're looking forward more through the summer, and please let us know if there's something that you're interested in learning more about, and we hope to be able to provide that. So thank you, and thank you to whoever was able to play the chickadee song. I'm not sure who that was, but it was really helpful. So thank you. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Bye, thank you.